Hey, what's going on, man?
You got it?
Yeah, I got a little volume issue going on here.
Am I low?
Yeah, you were a little low there.
Let's see if we can ameliorate the crisis.
I'm checking mine right now too, so
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm.
I'm right there as well. So,
Hmm.
I wouldn't worry about it then. Oh,
Yeah,
no, you
I'm.
sound great right there.
Okay, just an inch closer makes a big difference.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you, man. I hear you. My son's just recently back from his missionary trip in Morocco, and he had a really interesting time there. So I'm just ecstatic that he's safe and he's
Sure.
back home, and he had a wonderful experience. Got to help a lot of people, spread the word. His beliefs are he's very much like me in my younger days. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Always searching for that truth. You know,
Hmm.
it's interesting.
So that they go down there and or over there and spread the gospel, I guess.
That's exactly what they did. There's an established mission, and they have their ongoing activities and where they go and what they do, and they try to keep it as safe as possible. As you know,
Sure.
that's not a particularly Christian friendly region. So um, yeah, yeah. I actually was looking into it a couple months ago when he was thinking about going, and I found a couple of pieces of information about some beheadings of Christians there. So
Mm.
yeah, I was a little concerned, but it turns out the region he was in was really safe. The people were wonderful. I think it was a great experience for him. I know when I first began traveling, as we were talking about on other shows, it's
Hmm.
really when you start to realize that people are people everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is true, and it's really weird that you know we're a decade and a half into the 21st century, and that hasn't sunk in on everybody yet. The fact that people it's so funny to me that something that I thought was simple and readily apparent isn't. And you hear it today in a lot of the rhetoric. You hear it today across the social spectrum. And of course people, I think, are more discerning about how they vocalize it than they were in, times past. But it's still there. And I think it's even more devious and deviant because it's much less blatant. It's much more subtle. Code words and catchphrases,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I think that with the political correctness
yeah,
movement, with the liberal movement in freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
it really has done
Yes.
is forced it into a
Into
repression, a state
Yeah.
of
And
repression. And
you know what, man? I'm glad you said that because see, it's a terrible quandary
oh my God,
because I am not for bigotry or discrimination or in any way, shape, or form. I think it's a cancer on humanity.
as do I.
But the political correctness philosophy is a real danger because it does what you say. It sends those type of personalities scrambling for cover. But it's also, it's like anything else that's overdone. I was talking to somebody just today, and we were like commenting over the fact that there are people, for example, who want to make our society gender neutral, not to delineate to any real degree that males and females are different, out of the fear that illustrating those differences between males and females will somehow lead to discrimination.
Right, like using the term lead to discriminate, the phrase lead to discrimination.
Well, now explain that because let me give me the context of that, because I'd love to hear how does that work? The word lead.
Well, I mean, I look at terminology, and I view terminology in basically communication as the means by which all things are accomplished, whatever they may be. I look at a phrase like that, and I think that it speaks volumes to the manipulative tone of the statement itself.
Okay, but tell me how.
First of all, you're assuming that it doesn't exist already by saying it will lead to something like that.
Oh, I see.
I think that's ridiculous. I think
it's a slippery slope, Mark.
The women's liberation movement has been around for a very long time, so it's not leading anywhere, except for a repression.
Oh, I see.
And I look at that, and I think that when we view the effects of anything in the psyche of human beings that is repressed, inevitably, it promotes negative behaviors. I think that pressures build, and those pressures need to be released. And the human condition, I think, dictates that freedom of expression is something that is necessary. And I view a lot of the expression that we see here in this country from people as being fear-based. But I also happen to notice that it is stemming from a lot of very manipulative political terminology. And I think that that's what's going on here. I mean, we're looking at a movement that's a very big part of an agenda down the road. I think that's what we're seeing. Like, I have absolutely no qualms about whatever sex you are, being in political office. I view someone as either capable or not.
Right. It
makes no difference to me what color you are. It makes no difference to me whether you're a male or a female. You get the job done, you get the job done. And what aggravates me about all of this is that it's used to manipulate popular opinion.
Sure.
And I myself have taken these calls for these surveys, the
polls.
Yeah, the Gallup polls. You know what I mean? And if you sit and listen to a Gallup poll, invariably, the questions are phrased in a way that you can really either not answer the question or only answer the question so that it accommodates the answer they're looking for.
Right.
Which I think is ridiculous in the first place.
And then they turn around and present and they promote that as if it represents something.
Yeah, the status quo says this. The majority. Yeah. It's like the majority. You know what I mean? And so yeah, man. I mean, I look at all that stuff, and it's I think it's all a part of that phrase that I hate using, because it brings up the old adage of conspiracy theorism. But the bottom line is in my opinion, and I've done a great deal of research on this, psyops are very real.
Yeah,
and I classify this as psyops.
The only reason I don't call it a conspiracy is because it never it's never ended. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's been
it's viewable.
It's been an ongoing, historical trend, and I think it goes hand in hand with what I talk about the anti-intellectual thread that's running through America, because you see, if you diffuse intellectual curiosity, okay, what happens is, the popular term is dumbing down. That's the popular term. And ignorant people are the most easy to manipulate because they require simple answers for complex questions. And if you give them simple answers, it motivates them even more. It's almost a kind of Dirty Harry approach to everything.
Yeah.
Just shoot your way out.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but, if you take this down and metaphorically, you look at the situation, what seems to be occurring, and this is, a generalization or a zeitgeist of what's going on right now in this country. What we have is we have this huge pot, and all of America is inside of it, and it's a pressure cooker, and we have the liberal or the politically correct movement putting a lid on top of it. Meanwhile, they're sneaking in all these fear-based subjects, like the immigration issues.
Yeah.
The terrorists are coming to America, but then you have the politically correct terminology that you really can't use, and there's also the fear that if you do use it, if you do express yourself in the old ways, right, that Homeland Security is going to come by and put a red mark on your mailbox. When the FEMA camps open, you're going in for retraining. You know what I mean? So we've got this pressure cooker, and to me, I look at all of this as an orchestration for something, because the bottom line is if you can't let off steam, things will explode.
Well, and these political correct people, let me tell you a trick. See, they're not actually liberal because they don't want to liberate anything. They are master controllers. They're master controllers. They want to control, first of all, your language, your vocabulary. And I don't mean to the extent to where they don't want you to say anything inflammatory, because I'm not promoting that either. But they want to control the mundane character of your vocabulary. They want to control the mundane character of it. And they try to slap a new name on everything as fast and as furious as they can. And they get incensed if you have the temerity to actually call something what it is. Right? Like, hey, you know what? This kid over here is acting like a fool in class. You know why? Because he's a fool. And he's acting out, and he's a badass. Don't call him bad. Well, that's what he is. That's what he is. And me calling him something else is not going to fix it. It's going to exacerbate the problem because you're misdiagnosing it.
Yeah.
And, time out. What is that? Really? Time out? You're giving the kid a break. You're giving a kid. So, I mean, it's so silly to me. With these, I'm talking particularly with kids now. It's because it manifests in that arena. I mean, I can tell you, my father didn't play timeout. My father played ass out.
Yeah, as did mine.
Okay,
as did mine.
And people can speak to the validity of that technique of child rearing, but I can tell you, I was around then and I'm around now. And what I see now is a lot more troubling than what I know was around then.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. That's for sure.
You know, and I'm not saying Dr. Lester said beat your kids. I didn't say that.
No. But to your point is taken. I think that I look at everything that goes on now and vocabulary, definition itself, terminology is being curbed, changed, altered. It's being formed, reformed. You can keep on going with the terms to describe what's going on here, and that's one of the reasons why I consider it it's personal to me. It's very personal to me to speak plainly in the way I communicate about the subjects that I'm very passionate about, and in particular my research. I watch the terminology. You can see fear-based comments. People are deathly afraid to say what needs to be said. And the way I view situations like what we're going through in this country, and I think that all of what we're talking about now is the way the country's going now is systemic of exactly what we're talking about. We're going into the core issue of how the manipulation and change of what a lot of needs to be changed, yes, but a lot of it, a great deal of it, is curbing freedom of speech. And in doing so, like we said, there's a great deal of repression that's going to turn into oppression. And once that happens, rebellion is imminent. There is no way around it. You cannot beat the slaves for very long before they rebel. And it's just a matter of time before all of this becomes just that in the psyche of the American people. I don't care what subject is. I'm to the point now where my research is that I've taken enough lashes over it, and I will speak my mind. And it's interesting because in the subject matter that I normally deal with in the Bigfoot subject and with my research, when I present the information, I present it in a very matter-of-fact manner. I don't pull any punches. If I'm not sure about something and I don't have the research to back it up, then I definitely won't state anything about it, or I'll, say we're looking into that. But when it comes to what I'm showing you an image of, there's no getting around what I'm about to tell you. In the end of the day, it needs to be said. Like the death of John Green. I don't know if you saw that today, but I had something very. I was so angry about some of the things that I read. John Green sacrificed a great many years of his life, with a great deal of demonstrating publicly a great deal of respect for eyewitnesses and what they were telling the general public about the Bigfoot species. And not only that, but coming forward and confronting science to no avail, essentially, because like the others before him and the others that are around now, they had no support from the public, mass support. And it's individuals like John Green and Grover Krantz, and there are several other ones, that when they died, yes, the research that they did still exists, but they died having never seen what they knew full well was real being validated. And that's largely, in my opinion, due to the fact that people are afraid to come forward and stand up for what they know is going on and what they in fact know is real, and in fact who they know is responsible for all of it. And so my posts in regards to John Green reflect that. And my posts regarding my work and every aspect of this subject will continue to reflect that. The ball is in our court. If anybody's fault, if there's anybody to blame, look in the mirror.
Well, Green was one of the first, faces and names that I grew to attribute to Bigfoot research. And he published a book in 1968, which I think is one of the seminal works on the subject. It's called On the Track of the Sasquatch. And it's one of the seminal works in this field. And I recommend that folks track that book down. And then he followed up in 1970 with one called Year of the Sasquatch. And
both excellent works.
Right.
Excellent works.
And so if you want to backtrack a little bit, and I frankly still believe there's some excellent written or printed material on the subject from that time period, because it was a time before a real saturated global media. When, if you had to go to the library, look at the book, or you had to, drive around to a bookstore and find the book, and it was known by word of mouth. It was known by an occasional newspaper article. It was known by an occasional clip of some documentary. And these were not, Green was not a household name, but he was a guy that I could identify whenever I saw something about Sasquatch. Usually his name or face would be somewhere in the area. And so, go back. Those, people who are devotees of cryptozoology, go back and look at those books from that time period. And really get a chance to reflect on a bygone era of cryptozoology.
That's right. Yeah. John Green, may you rest in peace, man. I had a lot of respect for that guy. And he and Ivan Sanderson. Ivan Sanderson changed my life. When I read his book, Abominable Snowman Legend Come to Life, I viewed that document as irrefutable proof that this species is real. This guy covers every possible scientific angle for the existence of this species, from geography. It's an incredible work. He has accurate depictions from journals of commanders in the British military,
right,
having shot and killed Yetis in the Himalayas, shipping them to the British Natural History Museum. He has, there are works by these gentlemen that came long before any of us. And again, I'll say it, without public support, without public support, public acknowledgement, without mass public movement on these subjects, I can guarantee you the individuals that you idolize in this subject to this very day will end with the exact same results. Public support is needed in this type of stuff, in the Bigfoot subject in particular, because ultimately, Doc, what are we dealing with here, man? We're talking about an aboriginal species of human primate. There's no other way you can get around it. They're indigenous. If we're talking about Native Americans being an indigenous population, what the hell is a Sasquatch?
Well, I think that's right. I think and we're talking about, let me ballpark it here, because I understand that the number can be, up or down, high or low. There's kind of a plus or minus to this. But we're talking about 10,000 years. We're talking about the transition between, Neolithic period, Stone Age, and antiquity. They have probably been on this continent as long as the Native Americans, and here by virtue of the land bridge. I don't see, keeping it strictly theoretical. I don't see any way that they did not migrate across that land bridge from the Asian continent simultaneous or concurrent with what the people that we call Native Americans.
I think we have to rely on that information regardless of whatever information may have come to light that has not been validated as of yet. In fact, people are more concerned with debunking information regarding the true nature of the Sasquatch species, and I think that you'd be correct in that assessment. That my whole thing is this: if we sat by, what are we? We're 300 years into it now, basically. French and Indian War, you got all this stuff going on way back. 300 years into the decimation of the indigenous tribes of this continent.
No, go back further than that. Go back to the Spaniards. Go back
to the Spaniards? We're going to go 500 years.
Go 500 years, yeah.
We're going to go 500 years to the Spaniards, to the decimation of the indigenous populations of North America. Mm-hmm. And in 2016, although I'm quite sure there's quite a few college-level students who are blissfully unaware of what happened, most of America is very aware of how we came to be on this continent. How we took it. And when we move into that, what we have to assume, since the Sasquatch is absolutely real, is that they watched it happen. Mm-hmm. They watched it happen, and they were able to watch it happen specifically because they are even more indigenous to this continent than the Native American tribes were. And they're still here. And now they're suffering the exact same type of decimation and displacement from the areas they've occupied for thousands and thousands of years. There's no way to get around it. Corporate interest is ensuring that this is happening. If the U.S. government had in mind the Sasquatch's best interest, this species would have been validated decades ago.
Yeah, I mean, go back. I can't remember the name of the author, and I'm hopefully gonna get the book title right, but I think the book is called The Conquest of America, subtitled America Before Columbus. Now, that means, Spaniards. And the Spaniards talk about, and here's what's interesting, they differentiate. They talk about, of course, what they call, quote, savages. And then they talk about also the wild men of the deeper environs of the continent.
Very clear separation in those terms.
Yeah. You see, the wild men of the deeper environs of the continent. So imagine what those Spaniards encountered in the jungles, which it was then, of Florida.
Oh, brother, I can tell you what they're encountering. Go to Crypto Reality on Facebook and you can see it. Go to YouTube. You'll see it. Crypto Reality YouTube. Yeah, I couldn't imagine coming from Spain. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, obviously, prior shows you've described that they have their own particular little situations going on over there, but I couldn't imagine running into a Sasquatch, having dealt with the Native American tribes being a little more technologically advanced, thinking you had it under control, and then you see a tribe of these guys running around. It's like Leif Erikson. It's time to go.
I mean, if you think exactly, but listen, these Spaniards, they'd never seen an alligator. And now you have to put yourself in that context. Imagine if you've never seen an alligator and then you see them in what must have been incredible numbers in those days.
Well, not only that, but incredible size.
Incredible size. I mean,
now we've decimated the big ones.
Right. I mean, they must have been large, incredibly large at the absolute top of their food chain.
18 to 20 feet, I'm sure.
Right. Right. I mean, so it just dinosaurs. Okay. And so to see something like that, yeah, and to see a Sasquatch, obviously it was an incredible, and that's really why there was so much, even if you fast forward 300 years to Lewis and Clark, you have to remember at the dawn of the 19th century, America, the United States of America, the nation, stopped at the Mississippi River. Basically. You know, they disembarked from St. Louis. That was as far west as America stretched in terms of being populated by American citizens. And so it's no wonder that prior to their expedition, there were the wildest stories about mastodons and saber-toothed cats. And if you think it's all silly that they could contemplate such things existing in the western half of the country, among those unlikely creatures on that list were giants. And now this is not hidden history at all.
This is 500 years ago.
I mean, just go back and look at what the Spaniards said. Go back and look at what Lewis and Clark said and their contemporaries.
Yeah, man, this is not Paleolithic.
No.
Pangea or something, man. This is the North American continent.
Listen,
500 years ago.
You know, remember, Lewis and Clark sent back wildlife species to Jefferson. They captured several species that were heretofore unknown to Western zoology.
Wait. Heretofore unknown. Couldn't you classify that as cryptozoology?
Well, I would.
Yeah, there you go.
And trust me, Jefferson had his shortcomings for sure, but he was an able naturalist. He was quite a skilled, able naturalist, zoologist, botanist, what have you. But one of the animals that were unknown to their science was as mundane as the prairie dog. They'd never seen a prairie dog. Not exactly exotic, but if you haven't seen one, you haven't seen one.
That's it.
The grizzly bear was unknown prior to Lewis and Clark. The Indians knew about him. And what the Indians knew was how ineffective arrows were.
Well, in point of fact, the Indians developed a very effective way to kill a grizzly bear, and it involved using a sapling, a very strong, very firm, specifically sized sapling. Mm-hmm. And it was also, in my opinion, quite insane, the undertaking.
Now, you say sapling, are you talking about the construction of the arrow?
No, I'm talking about a gigantic spear.
Oh, a big spear. Okay.
In excess of 10 feet. They would encourage the grizzly to charge, at which point, because they could get arrows to penetrate, so what they used was the grizzly's body weight to fall on top of it.
Impale itself.
And impale itself. Yeah. And it had to be done just right, or you were done anyway. In addition to that, you had to move out of the way quick enough to where it didn't fall on you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's crazy. And actually, a couple of different tribes, a part of their graduation into being a warrior or of the hunter class of the actual tribe, you had to accomplish this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's crazy.
Yeah, that's. But I tell you,
serious gonads.
A guy comes back to the
on.
village. Hey, look here. A guy comes back to the village with a grizzly bear hide. You have to let him do whatever he wants to do.
I think that commands quite a bit of respect.
Yeah, because I'm telling you.
Oh my God, man!
But so these are these are things that are kind of quietly in the back pocket.
Yeah, you don't see many documentaries on this kind of stuff, do you? No. I think with the birth of radio, we talked about this before. With the birth of radio and communication, telecommunication, really, you look at corollaries throughout the years, and then of course we went from radio into television, and I think that what really those things represent are the greatest intelligence tools that have ever been developed. I mean, when I look at television now, I can't. It's like I have to hold the vomit down in my throat when I watch the news. And I hate to sound overly descriptive about it, but the bottom line is I can't stomach 30 seconds of it. You know what I mean? And in particular, the subject matter that I am very interested in and I study. I look at it in the same information, the same incorrect information is being presented over and over and over and over again. It's like, my God, man, how many millions of dollars in resources is it going to take before the public actually sees that the exact same questions are being asked 20 years later? 20 years later. I mean, John Green, that guy had more answers in his research on how to find and document the Bigfoot species, and it went unnoticed. If I had access to John Green's information 10 years ago, we would be having a very different discussion right now, I can tell you that. I have an immense amount of respect for that man, and in the research that he conducted, as you stated earlier, he was a pioneer, seminal works, an incredible. I know the man wasn't technically an academic, but he had more information.
But he was not. No. I mean, I don't know. He was not as. How can I say this? He was not as unacademic as you think.
No. I get that. But let me rephrase. He wasn't officially accredited.
Yeah, but I mean, he was.
But that man was an academic.
He was. Yes, he was. He was an academic. I had some notes on him somewhere about what his. I know he was Canadian. Oh, yeah. Now these were his like official credentials. He graduated from University of British Columbia and Columbia University. That's the one in the U.S.
So he was actually an academic.
He was. I don't know what his field of study was, but he had the benefit of a classical education.
Well, there it is.
So this was not just some wild-eyed, frontiersman, some kind of Yukon Jack.
Right.
Some kind of Canadian wild man out there just kind of humping around in the. So
we got to find out. I got to find out, because the way that he was always presented on television,
as was a yokel,
was that he was just John Green. It wasn't Dr. John Green. It wasn't John Green so-and-so and so. It was John Green. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that was intentional on his behest or what it was, but that's, I mean, literally, look at it. There it is. Yeah. I actually read a lot of that man's information, and I had no idea that he actually
graduated University of British Columbia
Two
and
different colleges.
Yeah. So, like I said, it'd be interesting to see what his fields of study were.
We're gonna have to take that into
that's a little investigation.
Absolutely. Man, I look at all that stuff, and somebody's gonna end up with that information. Invariably, that's what happens. I mean,
he had 5 kids.
Somebody's got it. I guarantee you. And I can tell you right now, it's going to be very similar to Sanderson. I don't know if you're familiar with what happened with Sanderson's research, but a lot of it came up missing.
Ivan Sanderson's material?
A great deal of Sanderson's information and the collection of his, because he traveled and collected. If you ask me, man, people wouldn't say this, but Ivan Sanderson was a noted cryptozoologist. They didn't call him that. They called him a naturalist. But the bottom line is he collected unclassified species for museums here in the U.S. and Canada. That's what he did.
And by the way, and folks, believe me, looking these guys up and reading their works will quadruple your cryptozoology IQ. I promise you.
Oh, absolutely, man.
Now, the thing about Sanderson and why he was so problematic to the status quo, Sanderson was a biologist. Sanderson was a biologist. He's from Scotland. And I know that kind of, it disqualifies him to say, well, he was a Scot, whatever. But he was a biologist. And so he had a...
What is that? Well, he's a Mexican biologist.
Exactly.
Well, what is this? Oh, well, he's a Russian biologist.
He's Scottish biologist.
What is that? I mean, are we not going to apply the same liberal terminology here to scientists or politically correct? I mean, the guy's got a degree. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and he was an actual biologist and had credentialed, established reputation for publishing naturalist research, publishing, nature writing. And so again, he had a master's degree in botany, and he had a master's degree in ethnology from Cambridge, folks. So here's a credentialed academic. You can't get more traditional than Cambridge. And you think that this guy did not know what he was talking about? I can promise you. If he walked out of Cambridge with a master's degree in botany and ethnology, that's a man you need to sit down and listen to.
Oh, I can assure you that his work on what he refers to as ABSMs, abominable snowmen, is the way he terms it, in Sasquatch here in the U.S., are the defining works on the subject. I've read several different pieces of literature from different biologists, and I can tell you, nothing compares to the documentation that Ivan Sanderson put in his book, Abominable Snowman Legend Come to Life.
And one of the great terminologies in all of alternative research, this term itself, abominable snowman, is just an awesome, hyperbolic, exciting term. Now, let me send the listeners I'm going to give the listeners just a little bit of homework as we go along.
Sure.
Sanderson published something you guys should look up. It's called Animal Treasure. This is one of his really early works, and it sets the table for the groundbreaking work that he was going to do. Animal Treasure is a report on an expedition to the jungles of what they at that time called British West Africa. there was the companion to his other work, Caribbean Treasure, which was an account on an expedition to Haiti. Now, this was field work and writing that he did between 1936 and 1938. He, at the same time, he visited Jamaica, Honduras, the Yucatan. And in this work, he includes illustrations, accounts of his expeditions, and he was also collecting animal specimens for museums and other institutions. So this is a guy who absolutely was laying some very fundamental groundwork on a mainstream level, but at the same time doing detailed commentary on the myths and the tradition and the superstitions and the paranormal manifestations of the West Indies, of which there's a lot. So Ivan T. Sanderson, we would not be here in this way if it were not for him, because that groundwork would not have been laid.
No, that's a fact. And in that book that he chronicles the Sasquatch species around the globe, he didn't buy any of it. He didn't buy any of it. And he admits that openly. But in studying these aboriginal tribes, these indigenous tribes all over the planet,
mm-hmm.
he began to see that most all of these indigenous populations were speaking about the same creature.
Yep.
Wherever he went. And so he started to keep files on all that. And the information that this man compiled is absolutely incredible. I highly recommend it. Abominable Snowmen, Legend Come to Life. That book will turn you on.
Right. He was doing what Sitchin was doing. He was doing what von Daniken was doing, going around the world, developing corollaries. A consistency of parallel data points. Now, if you think that, and here's what I absolutely love about Sanderson. If you think he was just about being a naturalist or a cryptozoologist, you know what else he did? 1957.
Yeah, you're way off on that one, boy. He did a bunch of stuff.
In 1957, he published an essay that will knock you out of your socks. It was called "What Pilots a UFO?"
That's right.
Look that essay up, folks, and read that.
He's done so much work on extraterrestrials and UFOs and history and modern day. Incredible. USOs.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, he was absolutely one of the founding fathers of, anomalous research fields.
Yeah, well, you know what, I look at it, I say he was one of the founding fathers of the legitimization of what was always and still is deemed alternative science. The bottom line is you can't study this man's information and not come away from it on any of these subjects with a real good idea of what's really going on.
So how could John Green, who was an actual academic, and Ivan Sanderson, who was an actual academic, how could they all of a sudden be doing something that is now pseudoscience? I mean, so you're saying that at some point in their research, they stopped doing actual science and started doing pseudoscience? Was there a transitional period?
No, well, that's where we get the misnomer. That's where the terminology is created and attached to the armchair researcher, disqualifying anyone without a degree who conducts interest or study into something that's not classified. When the fact of the matter is, all zoological science at its core that looks for new species is by definition cryptozoology.
Right.
It's a heavily funded subject matter, every single year by mainstream science.
Yeah, it is. And I mean,
it's just not going to be funded for anything.
Or don't ask for money.
Quo.
Don't ask for funding talking about you want to go find a chupacabra.
Yeah.
You can forget that.
Yeah. You know.
Okay.
The chickens don't matter that much. The
No.
goats don't matter that much. Just let it be.
Let's let it go. Right. You know, so, and it's those dumb Puerto Ricans.
Yeah, man, there you go. Right.
That's so, who cares, right?
Well, I mean, and here's the thing. If you're gonna go there and you're gonna say, no. You know, the hoops are not going to be put in that direction for you to jump through to get funding. Then you might as well say it's the dumb Puerto Ricans reporting it. Because that's exactly what you're saying.
Isn't that the subtext?
That's the subtext, buddy. That's the subtext. And I'll tell you something else. Let's take that and let's just go one step further.
Right.
It's the dumb Americans reporting Sasquatch. Because they're doing the same damn thing here. So you hear that, folks?
Not just the dumb Native Americans.
No. I'm dumb. You're
right.
dumb. Eyewitnesses are dumb.
You know what?
Police officers, the forest rangers, you're all stupid.
I'm going to have some fun here, but I'm going to make a fun point, but I'm deadly serious about the point. Fun old monster movie. 1954. The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
One of my all-time favorites.
Universal horror. It was the sunset of Universal's dominance in the horror genre. However, this was a masterpiece. Now,
I love that film, man.
Okay, so Mark has seen it, so he knows. So if you guys haven't seen it, you need to, berate yourselves, but go pick it up. Now, listen, this movie is a perfect illustration. What happens in this movie is a perfect illustration of what we're talking about. Some scientists discover a fossil in the Amazon River basin. They discover a fossil of a species that was previously unknown. And it was a species the fossil was of a 5-fingered hand that had aquatic characteristics to it. But how could that be?
That's right. It was sticking out a stone in the wall. Remember?
But yes. And so the scientists went in there. You know, he had a pickaxe. He was digging, pulling it out, and it was a 5-fingered humanoid hand with clearly aquatic characteristics, which is not a part of the Darwinian construct. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, but if you got a fossil, you got a fossil. And it's representative of something that once was living. And so what does he do? He takes it back to the university. Look what I found. Obviously, this was an anthropomorphic aquatic being. Because it's got 5 fingers. It has an arm. And if it's got an arm, it had shoulders. And if it has that, it's got a torso. So it's an anthropomorphic. So you know what happens? He talks to the board. Will you fund an expedition so we can go back and find the rest of the remains of the fossils? And when he explains what it means to science, nobody says, no, we can't do that because that's not mainstream. They finance the expedition. Now, of course, you watch the movie and it goes off and it's a monster movie, of course. But the point is they discover an unknown species. They go back to the institution, go through the proper channels. They present the existing evidence, which is a fossil. You can't get better evidence than that. And they get financing and they go out there and half of the crew gets murdered, of course. But that's the movie. But you see what happened there? And I'm bringing this all up because that scenario would never happen under the current model.
But that's the way it's supposed to go.
Exactly. So we have a realistic scenario in a fantasy film. How about that? That's the great irony.
Not only that, but I believe that that film, in the time that it was made,
Mm-hmm.
was indicative of the state of mind that the public, the general public, and obviously
Mm-hmm.
the writers and directors and producers of that film actually had about science at that time.
Well, yes, the attitude was discovery, investigation, and more discovery.
Validation.
Right.
Yeah.
And but I find it so ironic that you have a logical, systematic approach that should happen in real life played out in a fantasy film where you have the luxury of being as illogical and ridiculous as you want.
That's right. But here's the funny thing.
Right.
We have to watch science fiction to
get the real right.
To actually feel better about
Right.
our realities.
Right. Right.
And
Because
that's
in that
true
film,
to this day.
look, I mean, in the film, one guy is a geologist. One guy is an ichthyologist. Another guy is he's a biologist, but he's on the board. But you kind of get lost on the fact that he's a biologist. So you have all the correctly credentialed people there.
Yeah. Then you have the tough guy. He's the diver.
You got the tough guy. He's the big tough guy.
And of course, you got to throw in the damsel.
The girl is yes, and
Yeah, you got to have the damsel.
requisite eye candy.
That's right.
But here's the
that
thing.
is so appropriate. The requisite eye candy. Listen to
And
that.
it was Julie Adams, and she was absolutely on point.
She was,
however,
a gorgeous female. Yes.
However, what's lost though, if you follow the storyline, and I'm sure that after this show that sales of the DVD will spike, but
I hope so.
She was like a graduate student. She was connected to the university.
That's right. She was. Yeah.
So she had legitimacy to be in the situation.
Even though throughout the film, her legitimacy
got less and less.
appeared to take on more of a I'm going to take a casual dip and almost get grabbed by the monster 16 times.
Well,
I mean, they used her to build up the tension like Jaws used the barrels to build up the tension of the shark.
Well, Spielberg said that the underwater footage in that film, Creature from the Black Lagoon, inspired his underwater footage in the beginning of Jaws when the girl is out there swimming in the dark.
Oh yes,
and it absolutely
Chrissy Watkins.
Right, it absolutely inspired him. So there's kind of a fantasy film legacy there that you can track.
That's right.
But since you brought up Jaws, I will make the same analogy. Richard Dreyfuss plays an oceanographer who's there, and they called him in, right? I mean, he just didn't butt his nose into it. They called him in and said, hey, what's going on? And he examines the remains of the girl, Chrissy. And he was like, well, this is no boating accident. And he realized, well, the fix is already in.
That's right.
It's not why did you call me in? Because I'm going to look at these remains, and in 2 minutes, I'm going to tell you it was a killer shark.
That's right. He says possibly non-germanus, being a tiger shark, a Saurus glaucus, being a bull shark.
Called it a large squalus.
A large squalus.
I mean, he's using all
larger than any normal squalus found in these waters. Right.
And when the guy catches a tiger shark, it's a very big shark. When he looks at it, well, no, but this is not. This is not the. But what's the point, folks? The point is, you have a fantasy film demonstrating correct procedural research protocols. Now, the great thing in Jaws was that you got to see both sides juxtaposed. You got to see the goofy mayor who didn't want to hear any of it.
That's right.
Those beaches will be open.
You got to see the capitalist point of note.
You got to see the law enforcement officer
caught in the middle.
Right? Roy Scheider. And you have the academician Richard Dreyfuss, screaming at the top of his lungs, here's the deal, here's what we have to do. And again, a fantasy film demonstrating the proper research protocols, the proper research etiquette that should be followed, leading to correct results that happen to be inconvenient for the situation.
Boy, if that were only true in reality.
It's funny that these things are played out in the films, and you were right what you said a minute ago. We have to look at the films. Look at the original Planet of the Apes while we're doing this.
Sure,
1968.
Sure.
Well, what was the conflict? You remember the one ape played by Roddy McDowell? I think he was Dr. Cornelius.
He was Dr. Cornelius, the science officer.
And the female ape scientists, they were trying to tell their superiors, these humans can talk. These humans they're not dumb animals, and it's possible that we share a common lineage. And their superiors not only stonewall them in their research, but they already knew that they were telling the truth.
Yep.
They had evidence of prior human civilization.
The fossils, the buildings, the structures. Yep. It was a cover-up.
It was a cover-up.
Complete cover-up.
They even lobotomized one of the astronauts. They lobotomized him to deprive him of speech.
Yeah, let me tell you something about the symbolism of that film.
Mm-hmm.
That is one brilliantly written, and the screenplay, brilliant. That is one brilliant film.
Here's
if
trivia.
You watch that.
Who wrote the screenplay?
Oh God, the screenplay.
It's going to blow your mind. It's going to blow your mind.
Go ahead with it then.
Okay. Now, of course, the original novel was written by a French author named Pierre Boulle, La Planète des Singes, which of course translated means Planet of the Apes. In 1965, it was optioned to Warner Brothers, I think, and it was translated into English. And who was commissioned to write the screenplay? Rod Serling.
Oh my God! Well, there you go.
And you wonder why it's a great film? And it's important in just plain movie terms too, because it's the beginning of fantasy films getting the benefit of multi-million-dollar production budgets.
Yeah.
But you're right about the symbolism of it, and it is.
I would have to credit the author with that. I think the screenplay, the adaptation is incredible, but the author, the French author, that man is brilliant.
Pierre Boulle, and he always considered it. He published it in '63. He always considered it one of his minor works.
Well, I'd hate to see the rest of them.
Right, but when the movie studio optioned it, he was taken by surprise, and then when they brought Rod Serling in, they knew if you take a great book and you ask one of our great writers of fantasy fiction, which he was, to adapt it to a screenplay, it's going to be a masterpiece unless the sky opens up and swallows us whole.
That's right, man.
Right? And they were right. And like you said, the book itself is remarkable, but what Serling did is, and I know most of the listeners have probably seen the film, it's a symbolic, surreal, very surreal, not quite dark, but very surreal, introspective look at us. Because what those apes are doing is what we do.
Very good. Very good description.
And I'll tell you something else.
On the money, man.
I'll tell you something else. It was the first film I saw that scared me. And I'll tell you why. Because, I mean, when I saw it as a child, obviously, but there's a scene in the film where the apes are chasing the humans, and the humans are to the level of cavemen.
Yeah.
They're chasing them through a cornfield. and they're blowing this horn to flush them out.
Throwing the nets on.
Throwing the nets. And the camera pans up, and you see an ape riding a horse with a rifle on his back. And that scared me to death because it was so surreal. It's a scene that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it also, in hindsight, I watched it when I was younger, then I'd watched it again one day, and it really spoke to me about the existing population of primitives, mm-hmm. and the dominant species that was basically enslaving them.
Yes.
And the arrival of an even more intelligent, of course, in this movie, we're talking more about a time travel situation because.
But still, they're humans that are clearly not barbaric.
That's correct. Yes, they're more intelligent, and the story itself, I think every aspect of it is echoed in our own ancient history. It really floors me to the point that, and I look at that and I was like, man, this guy knew so much about history when he wrote this. It's just so incredible.
He couldn't have concocted that story otherwise, because what do you have? You have man, the civilization of man, pre-existing the apes' civilization. So the apes have made it their business to suppress the reality of man's accomplishment in the distant past.
Oh, how familiar is that?
You see?
And also it does speak to possible future events.
Sure.
Because we're enduring that cover up right now as we speak.
Yes.
And of course we're, reaching, but the bottom line is who knows? Maybe somebody will show up one day and reveal it all to us.
Well, they even, in the film, they even had their own version of Area 51. They called it the Forbidden Zone.
The Forbidden Zone, man. That's right.
In other words, don't go out there because that's where the stuff is we don't want you to know about.
That's it. Yeah, man. Oh, that movie's so great.
Yeah.
So great.
So, I mean, it's
you bring up so many interesting points in the symbolism of film that just not only echo but really mirror exactly what's going on.
Well, because I have to tell people, look, these movies, I understand that they're entertainment products and but you must understand, they were all written by somebody. A story was conceived and written by somebody. And these guys who write these stories are not just creating idle, arbitrary whims for our flights of fancy. I mean, they're saying things.
Yeah.
Okay? And they do entertain us. But over the years, you can sit back and you realize what's really being said. Okay? What's really being said. Rod Serling fought. The Twilight Zone ran for 5 seasons, which by television definitions makes it a success. He had to fight tooth and nail every step of the way to get his stories validated for broadcast presentation. Do you know why? Because of the themes of those stories. Because he was talking about symbolism. He was talking about the true nature of humanity. He was talking about war and poverty and racism and all of the things that we've always dealt with all throughout the history of man.
Oh yeah.
And he was cloaking it. Okay, he was cloaking it in the guise of science fiction and fantasy themes.
Well, I'll tell you who else is engaged in that activity is Steven Spielberg.
Without a question.
Spielberg put out a film about a decade ago called Minority Report. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but Minority Report is about to become a reality. Pre-crime, the technology now exists, and the legislation is being enacted to allow it, one step at a time, for them to be able to read your cerebral cortex and tell whether or not you're capable of committing a crime, at which point you will be tagged.
You know, that, as you were describing that, and this is how my mind, flies around the atmosphere. As you were saying that, I thought of a piece of film footage that I saw in a documentary in which during the 1960s, Robert Kennedy, by the way, whose assassination was commemorated yesterday, it was June 6, 1968. He had gone to some town because of extreme racial strife. It was quite a situation, and he was meeting with the city fathers. What are you guys doing? And I guess he was the mayor or the chief of police, said that we had to go and arrest these Negroes because they're da 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 da. And Robert Kennedy said, well, what did they do? And the guy said, nothing. And he said, well, why did you arrest them? And the guy said, well, because they were about to do something. We think they were going to do something. And you know what Kennedy said to him? He said, listen, on the lunch break, in the interim, before we reconvene after lunch, I want each of you to take time to go to the city library and read the Constitution of the United States. And when he said that, just everybody in the room just fell out laughing. You're talking about you're going to arrest somebody because you think they're going. You know what? Now this is something that would happen 50 years ago. So you talk about Minority Report. That's not far-fetched at all, because that kind of thinking is already well entrenched.
Yeah. Yeah, and technology, with nanotechnology, I've personally seen videos via Fox News, this is going back 8 years, where they had developed squadrons of insect-sized drones that had built-in 360-degree controllable cameras.
They fly around.
That were capable of delivering vaccinations. They actually had hypodermic devices on them. They could be operated in unison, and they looked just like insects. And this guy was demonstrating how they can fly in swarms. In a situation where there's an outbreak, they can deliver vaccinations. They can do all these things. But if you think about it, really think about it, isn't that what the CDC's for? Isn't that what they developed the germ-proof suits that they wear? Doesn't that eliminate the human element, the ability for rational thought? Doesn't that put the hands of injecting things in the control of people who are looking at a computer screen via remote control? I mean, there are so many questions that I think are being avoided specifically because all of this technology is being funded through tax dollars funneled into private corporations. When we look at all the stuff that's going on, man, this is George Orwell.
Oh, yeah.
We're living it.
Well, that's why I will continue. I've always said, look, I know everybody doesn't like everything, but I have always talked about the importance of science fiction. And I talk about it because there's hardly an aspect of science fiction going back over 100 years now that isn't applicable to real life. And I'm not just talking about the March of the Machine, but like if one of the reasons why I like Star Trek so much and I harp on it and I use it to make points is because obviously in the Star Trek universe, they have technology that is vastly superior to what we have now. However, what you also see in Star Trek is that they are always giving pause to ethical considerations. And they employ ethical reasoning and matters of consciousness with a level of seriousness that we do not.
Yeah, the respect for human life, or the respect for
life in general,
extraterrestrial life in general, is the primary directive.
I mean, I saw an episode of Star Trek Enterprise, and they were testing. At this point in time, the phasers were new, and they were testing the power of the ship's phasers by firing them on an uninhabited small planetoid. And before they did this test, they did intensive scans to make sure that this planetary body, was even devoid of bacteriological life forms.
Can you imagine that
in other words,
consideration today?
Right. They were, because they realized if there are bacteriological life forms on this planet, 1 million years from now, there'll be something else.
Yeah.
And so we can't. And so they tested their weapons. Now, here's what I'm saying now. They're testing their weapons only after they're sure that there's not one scintilla of living organic matter on this planet.
I think you raised so many interesting points, tonight, in looking at filmmaking in general. I mean, we've covered quite a bit of ground tonight, I think, but in looking at examples of what we see in film, we see, a full spectrum. I mean, we get, the patriotic, blow 'em away type action films and the symbolism of, obeying orders because,
wave the flag and take that hill.
The United States is at jeopardy here, 6,000 miles away. You know what I mean? And you know what I'm saying? Or 22,000 miles away. We're on the other side of the globe here, and these people are interrupting the cocaine trade.
So we've got to fight for your freedom.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
What?
And there's no shortage of poverty here in the United States.
Now you're going to get me upset with this now.
Well, this is where it needs to go then.
Well, because
the bottom line is there's no shortage of intentional deprivation in this country, in this trickle-down policy that we have, and in the way things have been going. I can tell you this right now. When I moved here in 1979, there was, I think, 3 large stores. Every single street.
Department stores?
Yes. It was like it was like the common ones. J.C. Penney's. What was the other one? What was that one? It had a funny name. It was like, I can't remember. It was like a furniture store. I can't remember. I used to make fun of it every time I said it, but it was common. It was like the mall. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And every other business was locally owned and operated by families and businesses that were privately owned, independently owned. And I can tell you this right now. If you own a business in West Palm Beach and it's independent, it's not doing well. if you own a business in West Palm Beach, I'll guarantee you 75% of them are franchises from corporate companies. You know.
Well, I mean, look,
it's disgusting the way they've shut this down.
As much as, and I'm gonna go ahead and be a hypocrite here. Look, I'm an Amazon.com whore. And so let's put that on the table. Okay? I'm not even gonna try to abscond from that. But it's not lost on me that Amazon killed the local bookstore, which I was an absolute fan of. They killed the local bookstore, the local book, your local bookstore that I would always I haunted them.
And you know how they killed it? You don't have to get in your car anymore.
Right.
And absolutely. That's something I worked with a man for over a decade that while all this was going on, continued to pound into my head that this was going to happen. That this is what's going to happen. And I said, man, there's no way. I mean, really, if you look at it, and he's like, man, Clinton's getting ready to pass this trade thing with China. I'm telling you, when this happens, blah, 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 these huge companies are going to come in. You just watch. And sure enough, it wasn't 5 years. And I could see evidence of exactly what he was talking about. That NAFTA thing?
Yeah. Well,
that NAFTA thing, man. Oh my God, man.
Well, because it doesn't even take all that. Listen, the reality is that Americans are always going to want it faster and cheaper. Okay. And
yeah, that's it.
I hear people complaining about Walmart. I hear people complaining about this place and that place and say, well, you're there. And I am too. Right? Because, I mean, listen, my hypocrisy only goes so far. But we want it faster and cheaper.
We do. And, the saddest part about this is that in my town, there are no choices anymore.
If you want this is where you're going.
You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. I actually watched my favorite, it was called The Corner Store. I watched the corporations come in and just destroy this man's business. Family owned for 70 years. Bait and tackle. The finest, and this is going to sound funny, but the finest wine selection. People from the island. This is one block off the island. This is literally 1,000 yards from Mar-a-Lago, from Donald Trump's club. Just across the bridge from Palm Beach. You come to the first lights, Olive Avenue, and there's the corner store. It's been there. Roberto, the son, owns it now, and his father owned it before him. And they have the finest wine selection in Palm Beach County. People from the island come there to get, these very hard to find vintages from all over the world. Right. They have almost 900 different kinds of beer. They have the best bait and tackle around. They have all kinds of fishing gear. You name it, this guy's got it. They had the best gas, cheapest price. And I watched these corporations move into the area and begin to put pressure on him. They actually convinced his suppliers, his fuel suppliers, to not only not front him the fuel anymore, but require that he pay in advance for the fuel that he actually received. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars for a month's supply of gasoline. So he could no longer offer fuel. That was step one. Step two, they came in and they started doing all kinds of stuff. You had the county in on it, code violations, all kinds of shit. This guy's barely hanging on now. And I look at that, and it's indicative of every single thing that's happened in the last 20 years in Palm Beach County. And I don't have a choice anymore.
Yeah, so when you hear your politician talking about how he's in favor of supporting the small businessman, ladies and gentlemen, he's talking about Delta and Coca-Cola and UPS. Don't fall for it. I hear this stuff all the time about the small business. Of course, Walmart may be smaller than IBM, but that's apples. We're splitting hairs. Okay. Entrepreneurs, independently owned businesses, family owned businesses are getting destroyed by these Godzilla-sized mega corporations.
Oh, man.
And that's just all there is to it. And I'm not saying that they are inherently evil. I'm just saying it's a fact.
Absolutely.
It's just a fact. And one of the things, I noticed over, I look from my childhood to now, one of the other areas was the local hardware store. That's dead because of Big Orange.
That's gone now.
You got Big Orange and you got Big Blue.
That's right. Big Orange and Big Blue.
They killed the local hardware store. It's just a fact. They even killed Ace because Ace was all over the place, but they were small.
Yeah. Yeah, I got 2 now in Palm Beach County, and it's like, where?
You got a Big Orange?
I got 7 Big Oranges. And you know how it goes. Right across the street, there's a Big Blue.
Big Blue, right?
Because they got to compete. You know what I mean? And the price difference is 3 pennies.
Right.
On anything.
And again, to cancel out the hypocrisy angle, of course I've been to Big Orange. But it's not lost on me what's going on.
No. Well,
because
where
I'm
else
not
are you going to go?
I'm not going to, you think I'm going to drive 45 minutes to go to Clyde's, hardware emporium?
I know.
No.
The only place you're going to see these things are outside the city, where small communities refuse to allow these corporations to purchase property in the first place.
Right.
That's it. That's it. No, you're not coming here. Sorry. I think there was a movie about that sort of covered this. It was with Matt Damon a couple years back. I can't remember the name of it, man. Again, here I go again. I got another brain problem tonight.
You start referencing movies and you can't tell.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, forget it. But it's the same situation where the corporations come in. And Matt Damon sweet talking, and then you've got the locals, and they're saying, "Hey, wait a minute, man! Look, this is what's going to happen here." And somehow they end up convincing him, and he backtracks, and it doesn't happen. But
right.
I mean, it's inevitable. We look at what's going on, and if you apply this, like if we can take this and spin it, let's spin it back into science.
Yeah.
Let's spin it back into the mass production of information, where science is concerned. If we look very clearly, very, very clearly, what we see is funding available for new studies to forward old studies. If those old studies, if the old subject matter in archaeology, anthropology, whatever subject you want to get into, if those studies have been deemed and termed myth, folklore, or where archaeology is concerned, you're not getting funding to go under Giza. You're not getting it. It's not happening, bro.
Funding?
You want to talk about lockdown?
You're not getting a passport.
You talking about lockdown?
Dr. Zahi Hawass.
The Valley of the Kings is like Area 51. I got news for you.
Dr. Zahi Hawass, the director of antiquities in Cairo, Egypt, and master Sith Lord of mainstream monolithic research. I'm just telling you, and I'm just telling you how it is. You are not going over there talking about some alternative theories. Or yes, you are not digging one grain of sand out of anywhere. Okay? He has got it on lockdown. He is an absolute, I'm telling you, he's an absolute, he's the master of all these surveys, and he is emblematic of what we're talking about. I mean, if there is a documentary on about some ancient Egypt and artifacts and some studies and research going on, you're going to see his face on that show controlling the flow of information. And if you watch these documentaries, look, folks, History Channel, Discovery Channel, Destination America, PBS. You ever notice, if you watch these documentaries, you notice you'll see a lot of the same faces. And I'll tell you this, I know a lot of them. You see the same faces. If you watch a documentary on the Spanish-American War, and then you watch a documentary on the Wild West, and you'll see a lot of the same faces. Well, you know why that is? It's not because those guys are just the best with that information. It's because those are the guys who have committed to towing the line. They have committed to the dark side.
That's right. Let's talk about the hoops. Let's talk about the hoops. Listen, you are not being groomed to change anything. And I got news for you. The hoops are in a line. We've talked about this many times, Doc. You miss one of those hoops,
you're being groomed,
and your ass is out.
You're
End
being
of story.
Let me tell you, you're being groomed to wrap your lips around the suction part of the sippy cup that you give a 2-year-old.
That's it. The information that's been presented will continue to be presented until, and I always say this, unless and until somebody is first through that door, and there are millions of people behind them.
And you know why you give
enough is enough.
You know why you give a 2-year-old a sippy cup? Because what do you know?
You know he's going to spill it.
You know he's going to spill it.
That's right. And they don't want that. So what we see here is, and what you just described is what I've been saying for 5 years now. And I'm a firm believer in this. The people that will be following these gentlemen once they retire or pass on, which seems to be more likely what happens. They hang on until they hit the dirt themselves. But the people that are under them, rest assured, will continue with exactly what's been going on.
Well, they have the properly groomed disciples.
You got to groom them. They've got to groom them. And trust me when I tell you, man, you step out of line, and your grooming is done.
Or you're not getting published, you're not getting tenure, and you're not going to be on these documentaries.
That's right. Well, that's the other thing, the hierarchy. You know what I mean? I mean, that's a fringe benefit. That's how they promote these guys that are coming up in the ranks.
Do you have any idea how many copies of your book will sell if your face is seen on the History Channel's documentary of whatever? Okay, if you want to move 150,000 copies of that boring, comatose book you wrote, you get your face on the Discovery Channel or the History Channel. Now we're talking about moving some units.
Now that is unless your book happens to be called Sasquatch Legend Meets Science.
No. We're not. No. We're not going to. We are not going to.
That book isn't moving.
No. You have to
and
sell
I have that. I actually have that from the man's mouth himself.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because those guys, Sanderson, those guys, Wavelmans, those guys were not publishing their research with the hopes that it would garner them some celebrity. Because there was no connection at that time to pop culture the way there is now. I mean, now alternative disciplines of study, the paranormal and so forth, are a part of pop culture. That wasn't the case 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
No.
That wasn't the case. That it was absolutely alternative, fringe, albeit interesting.
Yeah. In Search Of
was a remarkable program.
Unbelievable.
And I remember it because it came on Sunday evenings. I remember it came on Sunday evenings here, and we absolutely it wasn't just me. We absolutely sat down and watched it, and of course, you know, even by the time that show started, everybody was well familiar with the face and voice of Leonard Nimoy, obviously. And in those days, we would say, you know, did you know Mr. Spock is doing this other show? That's how it was stated. That's how iconic he was. Mr. Spock is doing this other show, where he was talking about the Loch Ness Monster and ghosts and flying saucers and the Bermuda Triangle and this and that and this and that. And he said, well, you know, it is Mr. Spock, so it's kind of appropriate for him to be talking about that. But those shows were few and far between. If you're 30 or under, you don't have any idea what we're talking about.
That's right. That's right. But it is fascinating that they cast him. I mean, come on, man. That's the most obvious choice.
I think, and I don't know this to be true because I don't know what the process was. I think it might have come across his agent's desk, and he said, I want to do this.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Because I look at
that
his
was
track
a contributing factor.
Yeah.
To my interest.
Look at his track record. Listen, before Star Trek, he was on The Twilight Zone.
Oh yeah.
He was on Night Gallery. He had a track record of weirdness. So I think he did it because he wanted to do it.
I'd have to agree with you on that.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the way he presented the information,
straightforward.
It was very straightforward.
No tongue in cheek.
And let me give you an example of something here. There's a show. It's called Sasquatch: Legend Meets Science.
I saw it. I've seen it.
Okay, and what it is you've got first of all the symbolic round table, the discussion, the round table of the meeting of the minds. You've got 4 or 5 scientists in their representative fields, and they're going to go over existing what are they purported Sasquatch evidence.
Makes you want to put a pistol in your mouth.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, now they go over it and they go over all this stuff, and of course this one's agreeing, and it could be this and it could be that, and then you've got Meldrum with a gag on, and you know you've got this one and he's in agreement with Meldrum, but he's not sure about this. Then you've got 2 of them who absolutely know for sure that this is a man in a costume in the Patterson footage, and you've got all this, so you've got contradiction. Well, they get to the part, and this was a defining moment in my decision to try to accomplish what we in fact have accomplished at this point. They got to the state of Florida, and they started to discuss the 200 plus sightings of what, according to eyewitness statements, were very large, and a lot of these eyewitnesses got very, very good looks at what they were describing. Mm-hmm. And it was 2 minutes long about Florida, and the end statement was, well, I think we can attribute these sightings in the state of Florida to escaped chimpanzees from the zoo.
Was there an epidemic of escaped chimpanzees from Florida zoos?
Well, we did have Hurricane Andrew. So we did actually have a few escaped chimpanzees.
Okay.
And I can tell you this.
Yeah.
Personally, in my investigations in the field in Myakka State Park, I have witnessed macaques in the trees. When you go down the Myakka River, there are wild, very, very small monkeys. And there are probably at this point hundreds of them. However, and I want to lay this to rest right now.
Please lay it to rest.
Watch the documentary yourself. Listen to the roundtable discussion. Review the information in particular about the state of Florida and how these are escaped chimpanzees. And that's all they say about it. Meldrum did not comment on that aspect of it. And I can tell you right now, if you go to Crypto Reality YouTube, we will make a mockery of that section of that documentary. That is absolutely the most disgusting representation and poor investigation into just the eyewitness catalog alone. It's more insulting than any other coverage of any eyewitness coverage by academics that I've ever seen in the history. And we're going way back where people with academic degrees just absolutely dog eyewitnesses. I mean, we're talking about this rivals the whole we're settling America, and I just dug an 11-foot skull, 11-foot skeleton out of the ground. I'm standing next to my wife.
It's worse than swamp gas.
It's the most ridiculous thing. If you watch our films, you are going to see that these people are full of shit, and that's the bottom line.
Is there any corollary between making claims about escaped chimpanzees with the manifests of zoos reporting dislocated chimpanzees after storms?
I personally have taken, I would say, over 100 reports in the last 20 years, and not one of the reports that I've taken was ever of anything under 7 feet tall.
To my knowledge, that's not a height achieved by a chimpanzee.
No. And most of the reports that I've taken, these eyewitnesses got a very, very good look at the face, and they were within yards of what, in fact, walked out in front of their vehicle or entered their campsite and took what they were grilling off the grill and walked off. I mean, you name it. I mean, I've had some crazy ones. I actually had guys send me footage of something. I don't know what the hell that thing was. I told him, take it off YouTube, man. I wouldn't even put that on YouTube. I don't know what that is. But I can tell you that the eyewitnesses invariably describe human features. Now, you can't describe human features, human-like features is the way I'll put it. Exaggerated, larger, but human-like, had a human nose. You can't describe that if you weren't within distance to see it.
Right.
We're talking about women describing male genitalia.
Right.
Clearly not a chimpanzee. Not an escaped primate from some type of a zoo or anything like that. Not only that, but in areas where there are no zoos. That's not to say that a chimpanzee can't migrate through, this and that. But, Hurricane Andrew, that's Miami. We're talking about the Miami Zoo being, torn apart. And a lot of those chimps were rounded up. I found that commentary in that documentary, that was a motivating factor in everything that we've done up to this point.
Escaped chimpanzees.
Yeah, and that was the end of it. It was just like, okay, let's move on now. We've explained Florida. You know what I mean? It's like, I was watching it. I think I was watching it with my mother, and she looked at me and she could see the veins popping out the side of my head, and she was like, "I'm not even going to go there right now." Do
you know what kind of tracks a chimpanzee leaves?
It sure as hell isn't 18 inches long. I got news for you, and it obviously has a divergent toe.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? This is where I call on the general public invariably, man, in these situations, and I say, how much more are you going to take? Because the bottom line is you're watching this. 2 to 7 million people a week are watching this.
I think the bigger question, I think the problem with that gets into why should we care?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
That's where
Well, you know what? That's where I think, Doc, that the primary consideration has to be, first of all, they need to be educated on what really is out there. And not only that, but the seriousness of the issue. We have been introduced a dialogue on this subject that is absolutely contrary to what the information itself ultimately represents. And I consider it my job, a personal mission, to reintroduce a more serious dialogue on this subject based on the facts, the truth of what's being filmed, the evidence we're finding. I am yet to find a signal track from 3 inches long to 19 inches long, and I found well over 1,000 in the last 17 months. Over 1,000 tracks from the same 4 identifiable individuals and a toddler with a 3.5-inch track, and not one of them have a divergent toe. Not one of them. And I'll tell you right now, I don't care who you are, you're not walking barefoot in the areas I go. It's just not happening.
Wow. Well, now, I think this is a good place here while we're on this subject. On a recent show, we announced the creation of a live lecture series, Cryptozoology 101, The Sasquatch Reality. And this is a live lecture series that Mark is conducting for all interested parties. And now, when we first announced it, I unintentionally misspoke the toll-free number where you can get the information. I corrected it only minutes later in the program, so I'm not really sure how it got that out of control. But I do know. But yeah, I do know that everything is in order now, because I did get phone calls today inquiring about it. So I do know that the right number. So what I want to do now, just take a couple of minutes, is to just put that out there again. Again, this is going to be a live lecture series via Skype, which you can download for free. Most of you have it already. A 5-part lecture series that Mark is going to be presenting on. All right. So if you're interested in this, here's all you have to do. Now here is the toll-free number. And I've heard everything. I mean, people say, well, this phone number's to this, it's to that, and here's the number. It's a toll-free. It's 800-965-8504. 1-800-965-8504. If you dial that number, you're going to get the information to register for it. If you've got Skype already, there's nothing else you need to do with your computer. If you don't have Skype, you can download it for free in 2 minutes. So very briefly, Mark, tell the people what they will get with this project, with this presentation.
Well, what I want to be very clear about, first of all, is that the information that we are going to disseminate to you is of value in two different ways. If you're interested in learning about what is out there, and that's all, you're going to do that. You're going to get that. You're going to learn. By the time this course is over with, you will know what's going on here, okay? You're going to know all about it. And I'm talking about details. Mm-hmm. We're talking about details about how these beings live in the wild, how they exist, every single aspect of it. The other pertinent information is that if you're interested in conducting field research yourself, by the end of that course, you'll know everything I know, And if you go back and look at our body of work on Crypto Reality YouTube, or if you just view our images on my page, Mark Zasky page, some in the Agenda Earth page, some in the Bigfoot Researchers Journal page on Facebook, you are going to see things that you have not seen anywhere else. What I can tell you is you're going to know how to find these things. I'm going to take you through all the way through from step one to the very end in presenting your information to the public and how to deal with skepticism and how not to deal with skepticism. So it's going to be a complete course from what we know from the vast amount of field research that we've conducted. And if you have any doubts about the field research we've conducted, like I said, it's all been filmed, so you can watch it in the Bigfoot Researchers Journal on YouTube.
Now, because this lecture series is being presented to the public through the auspices of the Institute of Metaphysics, there's going to be a certificate granted to people who complete all 5 hours of the series. People are absolutely free to register for whatever component or part of this they want, 1 hour, 2 hours, or what have you. But if you want the accompanying certification, you have to take all 5 hours. And those options will be made available to you on the registration form. It's a one-page, it's a very short form. And it's just the requisite, name, address, phone number, email address, Skype name, those kind of things. We're not trying to intrude into anybody. We just want to have this thing registered for properly. And so we know how to contact you when it's time to do everything. So, I can tell you that if you're interested in the subject, if you're following Agenda Earth, if you're following Crypto Reality, if you're on any of the associated Facebook pages and you're posting and you're reading and you're commenting, you're going to get information far above and beyond what you see on Facebook, online, on the videos, even than what you hear us talking about.
That's right.
Because there's some aspects of this that Mark does not put out to the general public.
Most.
Okay? And trust me, when you sit in on these lectures and you hear the nature of the information, you're going to say, oh, that's why he didn't put it out to the public. But at the same time, we decided to make this available to those interested parties because, if you sign up for the series, if you sign up for these lectures, you are interested in this subject matter and you want to know more than just what's out there, floating around out there in the ether for the general public. So again, if you want to register, it's 800-965-8504. And we're not going to put you through a whole lot. We'll get you registered up, and it's something that you're not going to want to. Listen, I'm going to sit in on this because I want to hear. There's a lot of this stuff I don't know. So I absolutely want to hear what he's going to say.
Well, I can tell you this: in developing the information that enable us to accomplish what we have. And we get hundreds and hundreds of emails a month from people. Yep. I get probably, I would say between 50 and 70 several page long emails from people. The communication that we're getting over the research that we're conducting is incredible. And it's mostly questions.
Sure.
This is your chance. You're going to have me at your disposal during these courses. Live. We'll have times for you to be taking some notes on this stuff, but also the Q&A aspects of all of it as well.
That's a good point. This is not going to be some kind of nickel and dime situation where you're going to be talking with Mark. Okay? And it's not going to be one of those kind of things where you're in the back of the room and you're going to be with Mark, asking him questions, picking his brain, listening to his information and what have you. And so I'm telling you, this is really where you want to be, on this project. And, so, we had some people call today inquiring. And for those people who called, their material has been sent out to them to register. So if you want to participate, you know what you need to do. If you're on the Agenda Earth website, if you're on the Institute of Metaphysics website, you've seen the promo. There's a cool new video out there just giving you information, and you want to take advantage of that, I am sure. So there you go. There you go. I think this has been like another great episode, Mark. What do you think?
I think it's fabulous, man. I think it's fabulous, and I'm very interested in helping our listeners who are interested in this, because the bottom line is this, man. You can do what I did, which was basically hike thousands of miles. I probably hiked the length of Florida twice with Melanie. Or you can receive information that'll cut your learning curve by 90%.
Yep.
We'll put you in close proximity. That's the bottom line.
Yep.
I think we had a great show, man. I'm really good. I'm excited about this one. We covered a lot of really good information. The passing of John Green, it's inevitable. It happens.
Right.
And I just have one thing to say about that.
Okay.
These people are going to continue to pass because they've been around for a while. And although they've had some support, the support that's needed to rally mainstream science, to rally these people's colleagues into action, has as of yet not occurred. And that is something that we are trying to change. So for Mark Zasky here in Agenda Earth and
Dr. William Lester,
thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.